Emma Carter's perfectly manicured nails curled around the chipped handle of the coffee pot, her Cartier watch glinting briefly as it slipped from beneath the cuff of her silk blouse. At 32, she wasn't pouring coffee out of necessity. It was a role forced upon her by Victoria Lancaster, her venomous mother-in-law, whose sharp tongue had carved Emma's place in this family as little more than a prop. 5 years of marriage to Ryan Lancaster had taught her their unspoken creed. Appearances mattered more than truth, and loyalty was a one-way street. Careful not to spill, Victoria sneered, tugging at her ill-fitting knockoff blazer with a self-satisfied smirk. We wouldn't want you embarrassing us more than you already do. A ripple of laughter spread through the boardroom, a chorus of yes-men and distant cousins eager to curry favor with the matriarch. Ryan, seated at the far end of the polished mahogany table, didn't join in. His eyes stayed glued to his laptop screen, fingers hovering over the keys, a masterclass in avoiding conflict, always at Emma's expense. Her grip on the pot remained steady as she poured, the rich aroma curling into the air. They didn't know about her Stanford MBA, earned through sleepless nights and relentless ambition, or her real position, the silent CEO of Innovatech Industries, a tech conglomerate that dwarfed their failing enterprise. Ryan had pleaded with her to keep it hidden, his voice soft and desperate, claiming it would keep the peace with his overbearing mother. For years, she'd played along, swallowing the insults, biding her time. But today, that charade was about to end. Victoria's voice sliced through the room like a whip. Hurry up, coffee girl. Our CEO's arriving soon, and we need to look professional. Emma bit back a smirk, her lips twitching with the secret she'd held for months. She knew exactly what was coming. Innovatech had been quietly acquiring shares of Lancaster Enterprises, her in-laws' crumbling family business, piece by meticulous piece. Today's meeting wasn't about an acquisition offer. It was a takeover, a guillotine drop she'd orchestrated from the shadows. In mere moments, Victoria and Ryan would learn the woman they dismissed as a servant was the one holding the blade. The boardroom doors swung open with a soft thud, and Daniel Park, Innovatech's sharp-suited public face, strode in. Apologies for the delay, he said, his voice smooth as glass, then froze mid-step. His dark eyes landed on Emma, coffee pot in hand, and a flicker of confusion crossed his usually composed features. "Mrs. Lancaster?" he asked, disbelief threading through his tone. Emma flashed a smooth, effortless smile, her pulse steady despite the adrenaline simmering beneath her skin. "Just Emma. Cream and sugar?" Daniel recovered fast, though his gaze lingered with a dozen unspoken questions. "Black, thanks." Victoria practically elbowed Emma aside, her voice dripping with rehearsed charm. "Mr. Park, what an honor to have you here. Please, ignore our daughter-in-law. She's just filling in. Catering fell through, you see." Daniel's brows shot up, a faint amusement tugging at his lips. "Your daughter-in-law?" Victoria sighed theatrically, playing the martyr with practiced ease. "Unfortunately, yes. But let's talk business. Your offer last week was a lower than we'd hoped." Emma tapped out a quick text to Daniel under the table, her fingers deft. "Play along. Trust me." He gave a subtle nod, adjusting his tie, and cleared his throat. "Let's review your company's current standing before we discuss numbers." Victoria launched into a grandiose speech about their proud family legacy, her words polished but hollow, glossing over the rot beneath. Plummeting sales, unpaid vendors, a bankruptcy looming like a storm on the horizon. Emma leaned against the wall near the window, scrolling her phone as if bored, the city skyline a silent witness to her patience. A message from her assistant buzzed in. "Acquisition papers signed. It's done. It was time." "I need to step out," Emma said, gathering her purse with casual grace, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood. Victoria scoffed, loud enough to turn heads. Typical. No respect for family business. Always running off when it matters. Emma paused at the door, turning with a faint, knowing smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Actually, I've got a board meeting." She met Daniel's gaze, a spark passing between them. "See you there." Daniel grinned, a glint of admiration in his expression. "Of course, Madam CEO." The room plunged into stunned silence. Victoria's champagne glass slipped from her trembling hand, shattering on the floor in a spray of golden liquid. Ryan's head snapped up from his laptop, his face paling as if he'd seen a ghost. "What did you just say?" Emma slid a sleek folder onto the table, her movements deliberate. "Let's clarify who's acquiring whom. Innovatech, my company, owns 48% of Lancaster Enterprises. Today's meeting isn't a negotiation. It's a takeover." Victoria's face twisted in disbelief, her voice a hiss. "Impossible." Emma arched a brow, her tone cool and cutting. "You'd know if you'd read the reports I sent last year. But you were too busy calling me coffee girl to notice." Ryan stammered, his hands shaking. "You've been spying on us?" "Spying?" Emma let out a dry, humorless laugh. "No, Ryan. It's called due diligence, something you'd understand if you'd ever opened a spreadsheet instead of hiding behind your mother's shadow." Daniel stepped forward, his voice crisp and authoritative. "The transition starts now. All leadership roles will be reassessed based on merit, not family ties." Victoria lunged for the papers, her hands trembling as she flipped through them. "These numbers can't be right." "They are," Emma said, her voice ice-cold. "You're standing on a cliff, Victoria. Jump or I'll push." Ryan slammed the table, desperation flaring in his eyes. "We'll fight this. Our lawyers." "Your lawyers work for the board," Emma cut in, tapping the final contract with a manicured nail. "And as of today, the board works for me." Victoria collapsed into her chair, her empire crumbling around her like ash. Ryan stared, mouth agape, the weight of his cowardice crashing down. For the first time, the coffee girl wasn't invisible, she was their reckoning. Hours later, the corporate world was ablaze. Headlines screamed across every outlet, from coffee girl to CEO, Emma Carter's hostile takeover. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, investors, reporters, old Stanford classmates now clamoring for her attention. But one call pierced the chaos. "Ryan." She answered, leaning back in her new corner office, the city skyline sprawling before her like a conquered kingdom. "Yes. You outplayed us," he said, his voice raw with exhaustion and something like regret. "I should have seen it coming." "Yes," Emma replied, her tone flat and unyielding. "You should have." A long pause stretched between them, heavy with unspoken history. "Take care of the employees," he said finally, his voice softening. "They don't deserve to be caught in this." Her expression softened, just for a moment, a flicker of the woman who'd once loved him. "That's the plan." She hung up, the weight of 5 suffocating years lifting off her shoulders. She'd endured Victoria's venomous barbs, Ryan's spineless betrayal, and the suffocating role they'd forced her into, a silent servant in their decaying dynasty. Now, she'd rewritten the rules, and the pen was hers alone. Outside, Ryan waited by her car, his face a mask of bitterness and defeat, the dusk casting long shadows across his features. "You destroyed everything." Emma met his gaze without flinching, her voice steady. "No, Ryan. I saved it. You just didn't see the collapse coming." She drove off, leaving him standing in the fading light, a relic of a life she'd outgrown. Her phone lit up with messages from CEOs who'd once dismissed her, congratulations, invitations, flattery dripping with newfound respect. The underestimated woman had become the most dangerous player in the game. 1 year later, Emma stood at the head of Innovatech's conference room, facing a packed shareholder meeting. The past year had been a whirlwind, restructuring Lancaster Enterprises into Carter Innovations, dismantling nepotism root and branch, and doubling the stock price in a market that had doubted her. Employees thrived under her merit-based system, and the company now set industry trends, a phoenix risen from the ashes of her in-laws' failures. "Last year, someone called me the coffee girl," she began, her voice steady and sharp, cutting through the room like a blade. "Today, I thank them. Being underestimated is the greatest weapon of all." Applause thundered through the space, a tidal wave of validation she'd earned through blood and grit. That night, her assistant entered with a hesitant look, clutching a clipboard. "Someone's here to see you." Emma glanced up and froze. Melissa Reed stood in the doorway, her posture stiff but determined. Victoria's former protégé, Ryan's one-time fiancé, the golden girl they'd once pitted against her as the ideal Lancaster bride. She'd faded into obscurity after the takeover, until now. "I heard you're hiring for management," Melissa said, shifting nervously, her hands smoothing the edge of her blazer. "I've got a Harvard MBA. Unlike Ryan, I earned it." Emma studied her, then gestured to a chair, her expression unreadable. "Sit." Melissa sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her voice low but firm. "I know this is awkward. Victoria trained me, pushed me to be her pawn. She wanted me to marry Ryan, to keep the family pure. But I'm not her." Emma leaned forward, her gaze piercing through the younger woman's defenses. "The hardest part of success, Melissa, is giving others the chance you wish you'd had. Why should I trust you?" Melissa met her eyes, unflinching despite the tension. "Because I've seen what arrogance does. I watched it destroy them, Victoria, Ryan, the whole rotten lot. I won't repeat their mistakes. I want to build something, not tear it down." Emma nodded slowly, a faint spark of respect flickering in her chest. "Prove it." 2 years later, Carter Innovations towered over the tech world, its sleek headquarters a monument to Emma's vision, all glass and steel reflecting the ambition within. She stood in her corner office, gazing at the skyline, when an envelope caught her eye, a wedding invitation slipped under her door. Ryan was marrying Lily Harper, a real estate agent with no ties to corporate games or family legacies. Maybe, free of his mother's shadow, he'd found a quieter path, one that didn't demand the blood of others. Her assistant appeared in the doorway, her tablet glowing with notifications. "Send a reply?" Emma smirked, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "Yes, a gift." The next day, Ryan and Victoria received a sleek, high-end coffee maker wrapped in gold paper, delivered to their modest new address. A handwritten note was tucked beside it. "Some serve coffee. Others build empires. Congrats on the wedding." "Emma." Victoria reportedly fumed, her rage a distant echo of the power she'd once wielded, now reduced to a footnote in Emma's story. Ryan just stared at the note, his fingers tracing the words, then set it aside without a sound. Back at headquarters, Emma unveiled the new company motto in the lobby, etched in bold letters across a marble wall. "Success is served best with humble beginnings." She'd come full circle, from a dismissed nobody to an untouchable titan, her heels clicking against the floor she'd claimed as her own. Victory was sweet, and she savored every bitter drop. The twist. 3 years after the takeover, Emma was a legend, her name synonymous with power and reinvention. Carter Innovations led the industry, its innovations setting global trends, and her face graced every power list from Forbes to Time. But that morning, a cryptic email jolted her from her routine. "You missed something. Check the fine print." Victoria? Emma's pulse quickened, a rare tremor of unease rippling through her. The old woman had vanished after the takeover, her pride shattered into dust. What could she mean? She called Daniel, her voice tight. "Pull the original acquisition contracts. Now." He arrived an hour later, his face ashen, a stack of papers clutched in his hands. "Emma, there's a clause. Buried deep in the Lancaster Enterprises bylaws, page 47, section 12B. Her stomach sank, a cold dread pooling in her chest. "What clause?" "If the company's acquired without unanimous board approval, a single shareholder with over 10% can force a buyback at the original purchase price." Emma's mind raced, calculating the implications in a heartbeat. "Who has 10%? Daniel swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. "Victoria. She never sold her personal shares. She's been sitting on them, waiting." The room tilted, the air thickening with the ghost of a threat she'd thought long buried. Victoria had been silent, patient, playing a long game of her own while Emma built her empire. With Carter Innovation stock soaring, a buyback at the original price would cost billions, potentially bankrupting everything she'd fought for. Her phone buzzed, jarring her from the spiral. Another email from Victoria. You took my family. Now, I'll take your legacy. Meet me. 5 p.m. Emma arrived at the rundown diner Victoria had chosen, her heels clicking against cracked linoleum, the smell of stale grease hanging heavy in the air. Victoria sat in a booth, smirking, a shadow of her former self, her designer knockoffs replaced by a faded sweater, but with a glint of triumph burning in her sunken eyes. You thought I'd just fade away? Victoria said, her voice low and venomous, each word dripping with years of festering resentment. I've waited 3 years for this, watching you strut around like you'd won. Emma sat across from her, her composure unshaken despite the storm brewing inside. You'll destroy the company. Thousands of jobs. Collateral damage, Victoria snapped, leaning forward, her bony fingers gripping the edge of the table. You humiliated me, stripped me of everything, my son, my legacy, my pride. Now it's my turn to watch you burn. Emma leaned in, her eyes blazing with a fire Victoria couldn't match. You think I didn't plan for this? I've known about the clause for months. Victoria blinked, caught off guard, her smirk faltering. What? I've been buying your allies' shares through proxies, Emma said, sliding a crisp document across the table, the numbers stark and undeniable. As of yesterday, you're down to 9%. You're out of moves. Victoria's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of panic. You're bluffing. Am I? Emma stood, her voice cutting through the stale air like a blade. Call your broker. Victoria fumbled with her phone, her hands trembling as she dialed, her face draining of color as the truth hit like a freight train. Her broker's voice crackled through the line, confirming the sale. Emma had outplayed her again, turning her final gambit into dust. You're done, Victoria, Emma said, her tone final and yielding. Enjoy the diner coffee. It's on me. She walked out, the door chiming behind her like a victory bell. Daniel waited in the car, his tension easing as he saw her face. All good. Emma smiled, a predator's edge to it, her confidence unshaken. Better than good. Epilogue and call to action. A month later, Carter Innovations announced a new initiative, funded by the liquidation of Victoria's remaining shares, to empower women in business, a scholarship program bearing Emma's name. She stood at the podium in the company's gleaming auditorium, the crowd roaring with approval, cameras flashing like stars. Some see setbacks as endings, she said, her voice resonating through the space, steady and commanding. I see them as fuel. 3 years ago, I was the coffee girl they laughed at, mocked by a family too blind to see my worth. Today, I'm the CEO they fear and the leader they follow. Resilience isn't loud. It's strategic. It's patient. It's the quiet strength that waits for the right moment to strike. And it wins every time. Back in her office, she poured herself a coffee from the sleek machine on her desk, the irony as rich as the dark roast. Victoria's final gambit had only sharpened her edge, a desperate lunge that had backfired spectacularly. The coffee girl had built an empire, and no one would dare underestimate her again. But Emma's story isn't just hers. It's a spark for anyone who's been dismissed, doubted, or told they don't belong at the table. It's a testament to the power of grit, the beauty of turning insults into armor, and the thrill of proving the world wrong. And there's so much more where this came from. If you loved this tale of revenge, resilience, and triumph, hit that subscribe button right now and join our community of dreamers and doers. We're diving into more gripping stories, tales of underdogs flipping the script, of quiet strength toppling loud arrogance, of victories that taste sweeter because they were hard-won against all odds. Turn on notifications so you never miss a drop of inspiration, because the next big win is just a click away. Have you ever been underestimated and turned it around like Emma did? Drop your story in the comments below. We're here to cheer you on, to celebrate every step of your journey. Let's build this empire of inspiration together, one epic moment at a time. Maybe you've faced your own Victoria, your own moment of doubt. Tell us how you rose above it. Or maybe you're still in the fight, pouring coffee while plotting your takeover. Either way, you're not alone. Subscribe now, share your voice, and let's keep the fire burning because the world needs more stories like yours, and we're just getting started.